If you do not mind, then appreciate my efforts by subscribing to my channel. Thank you very much in advance.
Welcome to Special News YouTube channel. The changing balances in the war between Russia and Ukraine, which has been going on for about 10 months, caused Russian leader Vladimir Putin to take action for defense. Fear of the invasion of Ukraine gripped Russia. We can say that Putin, who presented himself and his country as victims of war, brought Russia to the brink of division. In addition to the fact that the invasion attempt, which Putin called a special operation, did not happen at lightning speed. The resilience of the Ukrainian army against Russian forces and its power to inflict heavy losses on the Russian army surprised all countries of the world, including Putin. It is a well-known fact that Kyiv receives a large amount of weapons from Western countries. However, the fact that the fighting Ukrainian soldiers exhausted the Russian army and did this by carrying out more attacks in the future proved to be a success far beyond what was expected. After this time, it is unthinkable for Putin to emerge victorious from Ukraine. Russia has lost its special war in the west of Ukraine and is seeking compensation in its pretty important war in the east, as Putin said. Another move came from Russian President Vladimir Putin. Gathering intelligence groups and field experts, Putin is expanding the line of defense. Trenches were dug by the Russian army. New defensive units are being formed. Vladimir Putin had to act. The fact that the Ukrainian army reaches the Russian border continues to strike fear. The panic that engulfed the Russian leader pushed him to speed up and encourage defense preparations on Russian soil. Russia is under threat of invasion. From time to time, the Ukrainian army attacks targets in the Belgorod region on Russia's southern borders with unmanned aerial vehicles and artillery fire. On the verge of all these attacks, Russia built fortifications in the city of Belgorod for fear of Vladimir Putin. In fact, Russia, which has increased trenches here, is very afraid of possible offensive operations by Ukraine in this region. Britain's Ministry of Defense said on Wednesday that Russia has begun expanding its defenses along the Ukrainian border amid obvious fears of invasion. While elaborate trench systems were being dug by Russian troops in Belgorod, near the Ukrainian border, the regional governor announced that he had set up local self-defense units. In its daily intelligence update on the war in Ukraine, the UK ministry said, ditching has been reported in Belgorod since at least April 2022. But new constructions are seen as more elaborate systems, possibly designed to reject mechanized attacks. The British ministry stated that the possibility of Russian authorities promoting defense preparations on the internationally recognized Russian territory to revive a sense of patriotism is realistic. However, it probably demonstrates the true but false belief of some Russian decision-makers that there is a credible threat of invasion by Ukrainian forces. The assessment comes after Ukraine was accused by the Kremlin of being behind attacks on 2 Russian air bases on Monday, including the Engels 2 airbase in Saratov, about 600 kilometers east of Ukraine, and near Ryazan. Ukraine did not claim responsibility for the attacks, but said a senior Ukrainian official said last Monday that the drones used in the attacks were launched from Ukrainian soil, and on Tuesday morning, a third Russian airspace in the Kursk region, close to the northeastern Ukrainian border, was reportedly targeted in a separate drone strike. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken explained that Washington neither encouraged nor enabled Ukraine to strike targets inside Russia. On November 29, Latvia's Foreign Minister, Edgars Rinkēvičs, stated on the sidelines of the NATO foreign ministers meeting in Bucharest that Ukraine should be allowed to strike military sites inside Russia to fend off attacks on critical infrastructure. Rinkēvičs said that we must allow the Ukrainians to use weapons to target missile sites or airfields where these operations are launched. Rinkēvičs was referring to mass Russian missile attacks on Ukraine's critical infrastructure in October and November, which caused nationwide blackouts. Russian State Duma member Alexei Chepa said the attacks were part of retaliatory measures after the explosion at the Kerch Bridge leading to Crimea on October 8th, but Kyiv did not take responsibility for this attack. On the other hand, a former Russian commander and prominent military blogger described firsthand the shortcomings of his country, denouncing the disinterest of its forces in Ukraine. Igor Gurkin, nicknamed Igor Strelkov, was a former Russian army veteran and former intelligence officer who played a key role in Russia's annexation of Crimea and the conflict that began in the eastern Donbass region in 2014. In November, he was sentenced to life imprisonment in absentia by The Hague for his role in the dawning of Malaysia Airlines flight MH17, which killed 298 passengers in 2014. The commercial plane had taken off from Amsterdam and was en route to Kuala Lumpur. when it was shot down in eastern Ukraine on 17 July 2014, amid clashes between pro-Russian separatists and Ukrainian forces. On his social media account, Gherkin posts unadorned accounts of Moscow's military failures in Ukraine. In October, he announced that he would join the Russian military's efforts in Ukraine, but has since returned to Moscow and published his experiences the other day. In addition, Gherkin wrote that he made a series of unsuccessful attempts to join various units, before illegally joining a battalion of the Donetsk People's Republic, where he was stationed in the Svatov region in the Luhansk region. He described how Russian troops displayed inertia as they faced the deepest strategic planning crisis. Gherkin underlined that the Russians do not have the slightest idea about the final strategic goal of the current military operation. Newspapers wrote that in most parts of the Russian armed forces, soldiers and officers do not understand what they are fighting for, what their conditions were for victory, or simply for ending the war, was a mystery to them. Continuing his writings, Gherkin wrote that the Ukrainian forces demonstrated the ability to carry out their strategic tasks and, faced with the complete passivity of Russia, does not expect anything good at the front in the coming weeks. Gherkin reported that Ukraine will not freeze during the winter, and its soldiers will not be deterred because their friends and relatives will be willing to avenge the hardships they face. As a result of the autumn victories, the soldiers, who already believed in their strength, seemed to fight harder and harder against the Muscovites. In a statement, the US-based think tank commented that Gherkin's striking assessment would likely escalate tensions between the Russian military leadership and mill bloggers, and could rekindle the fragmentation within the ultranationalist community itself.